ladies and gentlemen, the John Jorgensen Quintet. So this would not be a proper introduction if I didn't thank my sponsors. Neil Salzman, not in the room at the moment. Neil Salzman is the leader of the Alcatel-Lucent team that puts together bids for cities and designs the network and so on in conjunction with the cities. It did Lafayette, and Terry Huval, who will be one of the speakers in this session, kindly introduced me to Neil, and Neil kindly supports this event with his Alcatel-Lucent team. If you come from a city or a town or a municipality that wants a network built, you should at least talk to Alcatel-Lucent and see if they can't build it better than the other guys. I would also like to thank supporting sponsors, Sunlight Foundation, Millennium Communications Group, and Google, our tech support sponsors, Atlantec Online, which is responsible for the screaming 65 megabits per second in each direction that we're getting at this conference. We finally got fiber in this building. The antennas that I put on the roof 5 years ago are now no longer necessary. I put some Motorola canopies up, and that's how we were running this network. And now those are redundant back up to the fiber. So it's not an either or, it's an and both, folks. Wireless and fiber, perfect together. Don't tell us Brett. Yeah, Brett. Brett's too early for Brett. I don't think he's up yet. Oh, Brett, are you there? Hey, Brett. Maybe he's entered the room but hasn't tuned into the stream yet. Anyway. Okay, so let me just mention the great partnership I have with Esme Voss of Muni Wireless, the indefatigable Isabel Walcott-Hilborn, who's been our marketing director. I think she's also a new mother, and Brett says yawn, stretch, okay. I would like to thank the people who helped get the word out, the Fiber to the Home Council, Scott DeGarmo and his Broadband Properties Summit, the New America Foundation, David Chafee and his shovel-ready broadband report, worth subscribing to, the Washington Network Group, Jack Hittery's Opinion Source, the Media Working Group, Isabel's Strategic Internet Consulting Group, and One Web Day. Thanks also to the Ecom Conference and Lee Dryberg, who helped get the word out for this as I help him. TMC stands for Technology Marketing Corporation. Rich Tirani runs VoiceCon. CTO Roundtable, Tiffany, John Summers, and Josh Bohr of AFI, and the whole crew at AFI, who are just remarkably wonderful to work with. Dwayne Hendricks, who is responsible for this edge of the network. Dwayne, thank you, wherever you are. Judy Clark, who's busier than a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. Gary Arlen, who found this place in the first time and introduced me to the people here. David Eisner of the House of Musical Traditions, who brought the John Jorgensen band to town, made it possible for me to hire them. And my friend Kim J. Ambler. So, now, is Tim Denton here? Tim overslept. He's probably out running around with timber. So we'll, let's see, we'll save that for another time. John, how has the internet affected your life? Testify.
Music is kind of a niche market, definitely being sort of European acoustic jazz music. And I got interested in it in '09 and really tried to do what I wanted to do for my living. But it really wasn't possible at that time. I ended up having a much different career because there really wasn't enough. There wasn't enough interest and knowledge in music. And what started happening, I think, is when the internet came around, a lot of like-minded people that were into this style of music realized they were the only ones in their area. So I started having festivals, and that raised the interest even more to the point where we can tour all over the world and all over America and play 150 concerts a year of this style of music, and I'm certain that would be possible. And also the ability to be able to market it and sell music, over the internet is no normal record company would ever be interested in making money off this music. But we've been able to put music out there and to get our music out there on our own. And so it's definitely done a lot for me and a lot of other musicians. And anything that's not mainstream, is fantastic.
John, you got CDs available?
John, you got any CDs available?
We have a few DVDs. We had a very successful concert last night and sold out most of everything. But we have a few DVDs and a few CDs left, so you can see us when you're not.
Yes, and you can also order, as I did, I ordered John's CDs from the internet, from Amazon or CD Baby or somewhere, and he's got several. One of them that is really, really good is Ultra Spontaine, which is also kind of characteristic of what goes on this stage, right? Tim, are you here?
Yeah.
Tim, oh, there you are. Okay, would you like to take, what did we say, 5 minutes, 10 minutes? 10 minutes, okay. Why don't we wait until the next session or the end of the, how about, since we need the speakers to come a little bit early for their own sessions, please. But I don't want to cast too many aspersions on Tim because he kindly moved to make a little more room for Tom Friedman yesterday. So thank you, Tim. We'll get you in there. A little commercial for AFI. They do a magnificent documentary festival called Silver Docs every June. One of my musical heroes, and probably these guys' musical heroes, is a guy named Bela Fleck, who's taken the banjo where nobody has ever taken a banjo before. And he got tired of people thinking the banjo was a white man's redneck instrument, and he went to Africa to trace the roots of the banjo. And his brother Sasha Fleck made a movie. Is a filmmaker, made a movie, and the two brothers collaborated, and it's really a charming movie. I came to the world premiere and snuck in thanks to John Summers and my relationship here, and it was really a great event. And so here is the soundtrack for that movie called "Throw Down Your Heart," the roots of the banjo, and I happen to have 5 copies of it in my hand. And does anybody know 5 musicians that might appreciate music like that? Here you go, guys. All right. And see the AFI staff if you want one of those. So now, let's move right into our first panel. Jeff Daly has become, in just a couple of years, one of the most astute observers of the bandwidth scene, the interest in fiber. He's formed a relationship with the Lafayette folks, and quite a number of relationships, and he writes a blog called App Rising, A-P-P, or Uprising? App-Rising, yes. And he's become really a very articulate chronicler and observer of the scene that we're all here to discuss. And I'm delighted to have him chair the next session. So, Jeff, it's all yours. On off on the bottom there.
Hello?
Here, take this. I'll turn them on.
Hello? There we go. I wasn't expecting that, but I'll certainly take whatever praise he wants to give me. So I think you guys are in for a real treat this morning. As you mentioned, I'm Jeff Daly, apprising.com. On the panel day, we're going to have a presentation from James Salter, owner of Atlantic Engineering Group, about smart grids, both the present and future, of what that technology can mean for our society, which I think will dovetail in very nicely with Friedman's presentation yesterday. And then we're going to get an update on Lafayette, Louisiana. I know many of you, as I've talked with many of you about this, you guys have been bleeding watching them have to fight the good fight over the last few years. And now they're realizing the fruits of their labor and really have themselves positioned to be doing great things. And then at the end, we've even got an announcement, a world's first announcement that I'll just tease you, and I won't say much about it until the end, but anyone who's a believer in fiber, I think, will be very happy to hear about this. So why don't we go ahead and get started with James.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, so yesterday, Mr. Friedman came and gave a great speech about all the things that are wrong in the world. What is it? Flat, crowded, and hot. And I'm here to expound on that a little bit and tell you how to save the world. So I'm delighted to be with y'all. I've been here a couple of times before. I'm supposed to be talking about municipal fiber projects such as Terry's, but I've decided to digress a little bit, and if y'all will indulge me. But my background, if I had been preaching here before, I would have been preaching that fiber is the answer to bandwidth needs, just as David said about this theater, and I would have been preaching that incumbents are obstructionist to progress many times, not all incumbents and not all the time. And I would have been preaching that municipalities belong in this business and it's good for the market. And these are some of the projects that my company's done. But today, we got bigger problems. So if you think about the two biggest problems on the face of the earth, and you're in this crowd and you're on the left, you'd probably say Wall Street. And a quote that might go with your viewpoint about that one biggest problem on earth would be something like the problem with investment bank balance sheets is that on the left side nothing's right and on the right side nothing's left. The wisdom of Mother Jones. The other biggest problem, wrong. That's not one of the biggest problems on earth. The other biggest problem, if you're on the right, and you grew up in South Georgia like I did, and you've never voted for a Democratic candidate for president like I haven't, my viewpoint might be, you know what, there's too many people feeding at the public trough. And my quote might be something like Thomas Jefferson's, the democracy will cease to exist when you take away from those who are willing to work and give to those who aren't. But again, my viewpoint about that being the biggest problem in America is wrong. So what are the biggest problems on earth? Just name two. Anybody. Let's play. Clean water is one, but it's a subset of another one.
Global weirding.
Poverty. Eisenberg, he's one of the three. Thank you for playing. No, the two biggest problems on earth, overpopulation, which causes all that other stuff, and global warming, which you could say is a subset of overpopulation. So let's talk about those two. Let's talk about world population. Again, I'm a boy from Georgia, and of course our hero in Georgia is Ted Turner, and the wisdom of Ted Turner has been talking about overpopulation for a long time. I'll give you one of his wise quotes. In 10 years, most of the people will have died, and the rest of us will be cannibals. That says it all. He actually said that a year ago on April 1st on Charlie Rose, and because he's Ted Turner, everybody took him seriously. But if you look at population on the globe, it's been increasing exponentially. I'm 50 years old. When I was born, there was 2 billion people. Today, there's 6 billion people. That's a pretty fast rise in population. But there's a lot of wisdom that says, you know what, this problem is going to correct itself. Maybe not in some Armageddon kind of way, but just if you look at some of the facts, there's some evidence that we're going to peak in world population in about 50 years, and then we're going to start to decline, sort of nature's way. And it's not because we don't have enough food to eat necessarily, but it's because of the lifestyle choices we're making. Rich countries already are in decline. If you're prosperous, in America, we have less children than in Europe, same way. We have less children. But what we're seeing is emerging countries like Brazil, Mexico, countries that are just moving away from an agricultural economy into the real high rich economies of the world are starting to have that same decline. And even in Africa, it's a little bit more horrifying in Africa, but the problem in Africa is the fertility rate is still high, but the mortality rate is high too due to all these different reasons. So I guess if we're talking about two of the biggest problems on earth, this one might take care of itself. It might not, but there's some evidence that it will. This one, on the other hand, and I can't believe I'm doing a presentation where I've got Al Gore on the thing, the next almost president of the United States. But the truth is, I'm an old electric utility guy, and you couldn't have convinced me in a million years that mankind had the capability of impacting weather and events like that on Earth. As an old Southern Baptist, I would have said that's a very arrogant viewpoint for us to think that we can change God's earth. But you know what? I think I was a little naive about that. I think Al Gore's right. My viewpoint of Al Gore would have been something like this, that he's a propagandist who's using his global warming hysteria to become extremely wealthy, riding around in his private jet through his firm trading carbon credits. That would have been my Al Gore viewpoint when I first saw An Inconvenient Truth. But the fact is, I can't take that chance anymore. 8 days ago, I had my first grandchild, and I just can't take that chance anymore. The boy, I think, is right. Thank you. So, there's been some visions in the past that have been wrong. Visions like mine about global warming, that hey, mankind can't impact weather on Earth. Well, for example, the concept is interesting, but in order to earn better than a C-, the idea must be feasible. That was Fred Smith of FedEx's Yale professor when he turned in his business plan for FedEx. Or I like this one. Y'all have all seen this one. We don't like their sound, and guitar music's on the way out. The Decca Records CEO rejected the Beatles in 1962. Good career move there.
Probably got a retention bonus.
Well, I think this one is going to fall into that same category. Senator Anafi, chair of the Senate Environmental Committee just 5 years ago. Man-made global warming is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. Thank you. So I'm here to talk about smart grid. I'm doing a little bit of setup for smart grid, but there's only two reasons to build a smart grid in America and in the world. One's the environment, the other's economics. I'm going to go quickly through the environment because I think I got a room of believers here. But we'll beat a dead horse a little bit because that's sort of my style. So if you look at Al Gore's movie, you would see these kind of things, that carbon emissions have gone up exponentially in my 50-year lifetime, that the temperatures have steadily increased worldwide in the last 50 years. Again, a lot of evidence. It's interesting to me that all the red on this temperature chart is all in the very northern and southern latitudes, which kind of exponentially makes the problem worse. But I'm going to tie this into electricity usage in America. You know, everybody in this room recycles, and everybody in this room probably got rid of their Expedition, is now driving a Toyota Highlander, maybe a hybrid. But that stuff doesn't add up to anything compared to what we're going to talk about with smart grid as far as impacting the environment. If you look at electric usage in America in the last 50 years, this is residential usage. It's tripled. So every house, and a lot of that's because there's been a lot more conveniences. We all have air conditioning now, that sort of thing. But electric usage has tripled in the last 50 years per capita. And the efficiency of our electric usage has gone down in the last 50 years. And by efficiency, I mean your average usage over your peak usage. The problem with electricity and the problem with coal-fired power plants is they got to be built for your peak usage at your house. And we all have peak usage at the same time, and therein lies the problem and therein lies the opportunity. Again, just to beat the dead horse, you know, us Americans, we're pretty good at everything. We're number one. Well, we're certainly number one in carbon emissions per head by a factor of 2 to 1 over the rest of the world. So where does all that carbon emissions come from? If we believe that it's impacting the weather, 40% of it comes from one source, coal-fired power plants. 33% of it comes from cars. So if we'll take care of those two things, if we'll impact those dramatically somehow, we've taken care of global emissions problems, essentially. And we're doing a great job. I was just thinking about this blog, which I hope they're not tearing me apart yet. But the idea of having 65 megs to this theater and having people remotely able to experience this, that is the answer to the car issue. The only way we can solve not having to come in person is to be able to experience that virtually, and the only way you can do that is with big bandwidth. So we're well on the way to that. Burning forest is 15%. I never would have believed this. I'm from South Georgia, and we quail hunt, and every year we burn our acreage so that we can have great quail hunting. Well, apparently it's not doing all that many good things for the environment. Buildings is 9%. And Al Gore's plane, that's his plane actually, is 3%. So, again, what we need to be about if we're going to impact it is coal-fired power plants and less cars. So what's happening? This is Greenland. In 2007, 10 years before, you couldn't have seen those mountains from the glaciers. This is Ecuador. 10 years before, the lake was full. Now it's a drought. Tennessee, my family's farmers. Used to be 50 years ago when I was born, always all you talk about is the weather and when you're in the farming business. And it used to be we'd have 2 good years and 1 bad year. And 50 years later we have 1 good year and 2 bad years. And it's consistent. That's because weather patterns have changed. And we're going broke. So all that's not good. So anybody here doesn't think that we're impacting the environment? Wow. Thank you. All right. So smart grid is what we came to talk about. Can we afford to do, is there economics for doing this today? I think absolutely there is. As part of the stimulus package, the Obama administration's put aside $4.5 billion, actually more than that. And the idea is, hey, let's get greener. And the idea that the Obama administration has is let's get greener by building windmills and solar power, and then let's build transmission lines to tie all those things to the existing grid. And oh, by the way, let's put some smart meters on houses. So one of those 3 is effective. And the only one of those 3 that is effective, if you're going to have dramatic impact, is the third one. They're also talking about carbon cap and trade, where us polluters get the privilege of paying money to pollute, and the money's supposed to go to the non-polluters to build more wind and solar and that kind of thing. That's the theory of it. The reality of it is it'll become another Wall Street trading deal where it's just a trading deal where everybody's making money and profits, and really the impact of it will be less, or it'll be an imputed tax, is what we're worried about in the electric utility business. So look at we talked about coal-fired power plants being 40% of the emissions problems on Earth, and certainly in the U.S. Here's the mix of generation in the U.S., the different types of electric generation. Half of it's coal, all the way down to renewables, wind and solar, is about 3% of our total usage. So renewables is pretty small. If you look at the planned generation capacity for the next 10 years, what all the different electric utilities, if you combine them, what they're intending to build, what they're actually getting permits for today. For the next 10 years, it's mostly nuclear, less coal, but still a quarter coal, and some wind and some other. So when all that wind and other gets brought to the equation, using all this stimulus money and building all these windmill farms and doing this desert solar stuff, I'm not putting it down, but the bottom line is it ain't going to have no impact on the environment, because it's going to go from 3% of our total mix to 3.3%. So what we need to do is deal with coal-fired power plants. The administration also wants to put in 40 million smart meters. What a smart meter is it allows, through either wireless or fiber. I'm a proponent for fiber because I think you need big bandwidth to do all these things. It allows the electric utility to have real-time data about the usage of that house, potentially give them feedback on that usage, and hopefully impact their decision-making and therefore the peak that they use, the efficiency. So there's 140 million utility electric meters in the U.S. Only 6.7 million of them today are ready for prime time, which is about 5%. So we got a long way to go. And if you look at the peak generation capacity in the U.S., last year it was 900,000 megawatts. And when you add up all the demand side stuff that all the utilities are doing, it amounts to about 39,000 megawatts. In other words, some of y'all probably have houses where by radio or some other method they can cut off your water heater during the peak hours of the day. Those kinds of things are about 39,000 megawatts today. So that's about a 4% impact on the demand in the U.S. So all that effort we've done so far has impacted us 4%. And incidentally, the real demand improvement in that reduction in demand over the last 10 years has been zero. So what we had 10 years ago is the same thing we got today. All right, so here's why this will work economically. So if you look at the investment in electric everything in America, every light, everything combined is about $12,500 a customer. So on average. So residential customer, that's a pretty good bit. If you look at the telecom investment in America, it's probably $2,500 a customer. And so half of that is the generation, a little bit, tenth of it is the transmission, and a third of it is the distribution. And so we've invested in America, book value of electricity in America is about $1.75 trillion, or about the same as our budget deficit this year. That was a little Republican humor. All right. So you look at your usage in your house. If you're an average user in your house, there's only three things that matter. Quit turning off your lights. Just remember that. If you don't tell you anything else from here, don't worry about turning off your lights. Turn off your air conditioning, your kitchen appliances, and your water heater, and you will have saved, how much is that, 70% of your usage. That adds up to 70% of your usage. So those are the things that if we're going to impact the peak and therefore quit building more coal-fired power plants, we got to control those, and by some method. So I was in Austin, Texas last week. They're probably the greenest city in America. If they're not, they should be. They have a city-owned electric utility. They've put in 400,000 smart meters. They ride around as a group in these electric cars that they charge up during off-peak hours. They're pretty committed to it. So this thing in the middle at the top here is a $200 thermostat that they put into people's houses so that either the people or the utility, that's one of the big debates, can control all of these high usage things like air conditioning during these peak times. So they go from this cheap thing to a $200 thing, and that gives a potential ability to control it. Again, if you look at your usage at your house, here's how it looks from the time of day. It sort of steadily goes up during the day. The hot summer peak hours from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. is when you peak, and everybody else in America peaks, and that's why we got to build all that generation so we can hit that demand on that peak. And what we're trying to do is that red line below it is to get you to flatten out that peak some, and that red line there is only about a 8 to 10% improvement in the peak. So I guess my point is I don't know if y'all I'm not seeing a bunch of nods of heads that y'all kind of get that the potential of this is pretty big, but I've seen it work. It's really in its infancy in America, but I've seen it work. 20 years ago, the electric utility that I worked at, they bought electricity from a generating utility. The rate that they paid for that electricity was 60% associated with the 1 hour peak. So the 1 hour summer peak was all we cared about. We thought about actually turning the electricity off. You know, just go out to the substation and click the whole street off because it would impact our costs, therefore the customer's cost. But tried to kind of decided against that. That was my idea, and nobody really bought into that. But what we did do is we took 500 customers, and we put these fancy meters for 20 years ago that were really fancy that we could read. We had to go out there and touch them. It wasn't anything that you could do remotely. But you could read hourly data, and then we set up an electric rate that gave them incentive to quit using electricity during the peak hours. And here was the rate. It was 30 cents a kilowatt hour during those 5 hours of peak period during the summer, the hot summer hours. So 4 months a year, 5 hours a day, 30 cents a kilowatt hour. The rest of the time, the 95% of the hours in the year, 3 cents a kilowatt hour, a 10-to-1 price signal. And you talk about behavior change. People would cool the house down to 58 degrees, and then at 3 o'clock they'd turn it off, and everybody had a timer on their water heater, and it really worked. So what we saw was the average home of those 500 cut their peak by 30%. Well, all we need to clean up the air is a lot less than 30%. We need about 10% to really have an impact. What we also saw was they cut their electric bill by 20%, but they only cut their usage by 5%. So they still use the same amount of electricity. So the electric utility didn't suffer all that badly. The electric utility's margins stayed the same because they're in the business of selling electricity. But all it did was improve that load factor, improve the efficiency, less power generating plants needed. The cost of new generation in America, here's all the different categories and what it costs. And as you can see, these renewables are the most expensive up front. That makes sense, though, because the operating cost is less. You don't have to buy coal to feed the wind farm. But, it's pretty outrageously priced. But all of them are more expensive than smart grid would cost. And I'm going to break down real quickly what smart grid would cost. Not even going to go there. So the average home in America uses about 7 kilowatts on peak. We build these fiber networks. We've built smart grids for a lot of cities. They really hadn't done much with them yet. They just got the infrastructure ready. But all in, end-to-end, cost $2,500 a home to build a smart grid. So you got $12,500 invested in electricity now. $2,500 more, you can really have something. And what you got now is great, reliable electricity. But we could really smarten it up and impact a lot of things with another $2,500 investment. That $2,500 investment nationwide is less than we paid to bail out AIG. You could do every house in America for less than we spent on AIG so far. And what you're trying to do is improve that load factor, lower that peak. And if you lower it by 20%, and we saw 30 in the trial that we did, that's the impact and the savings on future generation, and therefore the cost of the generation associated with smart grid. If y'all like that math, then come on down to Florida. I got some swampland. All right, but there's a big added benefit, and that is when you wire up all these houses for smart grid, you've also wired America so that we can have all these virtual conferences, and we don't have to drive our car as much, and you got 100 megabits to every house because you got fiber to the house, or maybe a combination of fiber and wireless. I don't want to argue that argument, but these costs that I said at $2,500 is fiber, so wireless would be even less. So it's sort of a double win, in my opinion. So I'm not going to go here on the different architectures, the wireless versus fiber. I'm a fiber guy. I believe wireless is great for convenience, but it's not great for broadband. And you have a friend here, I think, that will probably disagree with me. So there's some obstacles to getting this done. One would be the passion in this room associated with buying into that idea. The other, if I don't mess up here, would be that, you know what, we've got a lot of people trying to, just like everything else we do in America, there's probably 100 companies that are sitting on go, waiting to become public companies, sell the stock, get into the smart grid business, and then you got GE and IBM, they're actually doing commercials. So, you know, they're doing the PowerPoint, that's sort of that virtual commercial. We ain't got no product, but by golly, we got a great Super Bowl commercial. But the bottom line is there's no, like many things, there's no standards. So that's an obstacle to having a nationwide grid. The policies aren't quite there yet. You know, you've got kind of a disjointed effort. You've got the generation guys generation guys are about investment. They get a return on their investment, so they like spending $10 billion on a coal plant because they get a guaranteed return, and their investors get a guaranteed return. So that structure won't work. We got to change all that if we're going to make this work. Different regions of the U.S., you know, the ones that are blessed with hydro, like the Northwest, they don't want to do a darn thing. They got it made, you know, compared to the Northeast or even worse, Hawaii. But the big problem is you got 3,200 electric utilities in America. 2,000 of them are municipals. 1,000 of them are co-ops, EMC co-ops, and a couple hundred of them are investor-owns. And having all those people do a concerted effort together is a big deal. So there are obstacles to making it happen. As I say, if you look at the cost of electricity around the country, the cheapest state is Idaho, Washington, some of those Northwest states with hydro, and it's at 7.5 cents, all the way up to Hawaii at 35 cents. So at that 5x, you know, people in Idaho don't want to subsidize the people in Hawaii. So that, again, that's why it's going to take a federal effort to make it happen. All right, so I'm going to leave you with 2 points. One, I think we have a moral responsibility to take better care of our environment, and I'm convinced that more so than recycling or buying a hybrid car, that this will have a big-time impact at a relatively low social cost and social investment. And I believe that you can make a case that the smart grid makes economic sense if you look at the whole rather than each individual 3,200 utilities piece of it. If you look at the whole, it makes economic sense now. This is not something that we have to wait on. So thank you for the opportunity to preach to you a little bit this morning.
Well, actually, we're going to move on to the next presentation pretty quickly here, but wanted to ask a quick question I saw. It was mentioned a couple of times in the chat, James. Is fiber required for the smart grid?
No, matter of fact, most people that are in it today have a hybrid network. They have fiber that goes out to a collection point, and they do wireless to the meter. I'm convinced that the applications are going to continue to need more and more bandwidth over time as we get more and more sophisticated, and that's why I'm an advocate for fiber. But no, most people are actually doing that hybrid thing.
Great. And then next up, we're going to have Terry Huval, Director of Utilities at Yale U.S. Fiber, give you guys an update on the status of Lafayette. And not to beat him to the punchline, but they're live. And I don't know about you guys, but I want to give them a round of applause for that. Take it away, Terry.
Well, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. You folks are so honored to have two Southern gentlemen address you this morning. want to share with you the vision fulfilled and tell you our story in Lafayette. Some of you know about it, and some of you don't, and I'll kind of give you a perspective as to where we came from. Lafayette, Louisiana is located in the southern part of Louisiana, midway between New Orleans and the Texas border. We're about 35 miles away from the Gulf of Mexico and are very proud of the fact that our altitude is 39 feet above sea level. Kind of a short history of the utility system. In 1879, Lafayette was established. In 1896, the citizens of Lafayette stepped forward and said, we want to have electricity in our town based on our timeline, not on the timeline of the private sector, which didn't think Lafayette was worth bringing electricity to. So the citizens went to the polls and voted 111-0 to support building an electric and water system. You don't get votes like that today. The university was established not long after that, which we think the fact that the electric system was established was the reason why the university came to town or was established there. In 1949, we had one of several attempts to buy out the utility system. The city of Lafayette citizens decided that system was more important for them than the short-term benefits of selling out the system, and it was a very wise move. In 1998, we built our first fiber for the utility system. Our purpose was not to get into the telecommunications business. In fact, there are editorials in the paper condemning me because I said I didn't want to get into the telecommunications business, that I wanted to build a system only for the utility system, mainly because I didn't want to get into the big fight that would have ensued by suggesting that we were even thinking of that, although we were thinking of that. Yeah, the truth comes out. And we built this. The reason why we needed a communications link, we had actually a microwave system that we're using between our electrical substations to help us control our utility system and help us respond to outages. So when one power line goes down, you don't want the domino effect of all the power lines going out as a result of that. A communication system is necessary so that you ensure that the two closest devices that can interrupt the power to the downed power line are the ones that react first and not bring down a cascade of other issues. Not long after we built that, we actually got pushed by the Chamber of Commerce, economic development folks, other business people to establish some other use for the fiber. And that was to provide a wholesale and governmental retail network. So we decided what we would do is use the fiber to connect all government entities that wanted to buy services from us, the school system, the local government, the state government if they wanted to, the parish government. We have parishes in Louisiana instead of counties. And then also to be able to sell our broadband connectivity and internet to companies that would resell that as part of the services they provide to their own customers. So the logic here is to have kind of a public-private type partnership in a way where we make that investment and these companies serve customers. And we're kind of hoping that these companies, maybe we might bring some companies in town that could provide services to small mom-and-pop shops and residential customers. And, of course, that didn't happen because the real sales, things that really made sense in the open market, was to provide service to the larger customers. But nonetheless, it was a very successful effort. And in 2004, we proposed what we called our fourth utility. We provide electric, water, and wastewater services. Now we're providing fiber to the home and business. We saw that the provision of a fiber to the home and business service to be very much like the conventional utility that we had. We're selling a service, mainly the establishment of major pipes and broadband. Now, to fund that, we had to offer some retail services like telephone and cable TV. But ultimately, our plan is to offer nothing but broadband once the convergence of that takes place in the future. So in 2004, we made this suggestion. Within weeks, there was an act that was proposed by our competitors, I guess our newly found competitors, the telephone and cable company, that would have made it impossible for us to do this. The act said that for a local government to provide telecommunications services, they would have to use funds that they earned from the sale of telecommunications services to build our system. Follow that? And so that kind of shows you what was really in their heart versus in their rhetoric. Ultimately, the governor stepped in and gave us an opportunity and a forum to negotiate with the telephone companies and cable companies across the table from us a law that we thought we could all live with. We actually went through step by step as to what it was that, how we would go forward with this, and got everybody nodding and say, yes, that's how you would do it and still live within the confines of the act. And so we all supported the act, and it got passed. And then they sued us, citing that we needed to go to a public vote, which the act didn't provide for. In fact, it was one of the negotiated items of the act in Louisiana. You don't have to have a public vote for issuing bonds for a project. So they filed suit to force us to do that, and we lost in state court, and instead of appealing it, we decided to move forward with having an election, which we did, and the public came out in strong support of the project. What's really interesting is that we had the Republican Executive Committee and the Democratic Executive Committee sitting side by side on election day helping to get out the vote for this project. So it was looked upon as being a huge, thank you, it was looked upon as being a huge benefit to local businesses. The businesses in town had gotten very used to the fact that we provide electric service and do it on a competitive basis and a reliable basis, and more importantly, a responsive basis. And they looked forward to having that type of service from their telecommunications provider, because they were not experiencing that. The private telecommunications companies, realizing that the public had spoken, sued us again. And then, after we kept beating up on them, they found two unknown citizens, people in Lafayette that I have never met, who filed suit against us. And this was a long, expensive court case. And I can't imagine that they paid that out of their own pockets. We just have to only wonder how those lawyers got paid for by these unknown citizens. And after all the smoke cleared, we finally went to the state Supreme Court and got a 7-0 vote in support of all the arguments that, in support of our position against all the arguments that had been raised as to why we were doing something against the state law that we had negotiated. So that was in 2007. 3 years down the road, $3.5 million later is what it cost us to get to that point. Hiring all the lawyers, having to pay for the cost of an election, having to provide informational material to all the citizens as to what this project was about, all the things we had to kind of cover our tails on as we went through the whole process. $3.5 million. The good news is that the cable company, which had been raising rates every 6 months prior to that time, had stopped raising rates. But they kept raising rates in nearby Baton Rouge. So you take the differential between how much they raised the rates in Baton Rouge to what they charged in Lafayette. The people in Lafayette saved more than $3.5 million. Real nice win, just with the threat of competition. And in July of 2007, we issued $110.4 million in bonds for the project. On February 5th of 2009, 2 years after the Supreme Court decision, we started providing retail telecommunications services to our residential and small business customers. On the average, our business plan is based on 20% less than the standard pricing by our competitors. But our vision is far beyond just providing basic TV and phone services. What we're looking is to build that highway of commerce for the future. Wireless, we've already invested in wireless, and we expect to have that as a complement to what we're building as a fiber system. Smart grid, we've already got the study done, and we're going to be going after stimulus dollars to help us to build that, because we're in the electric utilities business. So we see a lot of things starting to use that foundation of a fiber system to build upon to provide more than just the telecommunication services to our customers. And we're getting a lot of positive attention. All that our mayor says he couldn't have spent $3.5 million and gotten more press than he's gotten in a positive way for Lafayette. Here's how the system works. Basically, we've kind of overlaid our existing electric utility system. If you look here, we have this is kind of a symbol of our transmission power lines connected to our various electrical substations, of which we have 14 of them. The electrical substations convert the high-powered transmission voltage to lower level distribution voltages to ultimately go to the home. And so what we do is basically superimpose our telecommunication system on top of that, having a head end with the satellite dishes to receive the channels, fibers going along the transmission lines till we get into each substation, building a mini hub there, and then going to their home. The value of this type of topology is that this head-in building requires electric power, and of course they have a very reliable electric power provider to that particular head-in facility. We also have backup DC voltage, and we also have a backup generation there. So this is going to be one of the last things in Lafayette to ever see its lights out, if it ever sees its lights out. Then you go to the substations. This mini hub is the next place where we have electronics. So you have electronics here, then you have non-electronics based fibers until you get to this mini hub and the substations. And those substations are the second most reliable pieces of real estate in town because we have transmission service on each side of the substation, and the likelihood of us losing a substation is very, very small. And if it happens we do, then we also have backup DC for that. So we have power here. We have power here pretty reliable. The next step is ensuring that we have a good power source at the home, and I'll describe that in a minute. Oh, going a little too fast here. So for those who want to get into the technical side of this, and there may be very few of you, but I'm an engineer and I got to prove it. The head end has 3 96 fiber rings tied to it. As you might recall, we built the fiber system initially to help with our electric reliability on our substations. So this is kind of the vision of that. Some of the fibers are already being used by the substations for what we want to use them for to begin with. And then in a substation, we'll have we'll take 4 of those fibers. So each of these 4 fibers are operating at 20 gigabits per second under this arrangement that we have. And this is, by the way, an Alcatel-Lucent product, one that we've been very, very pleased with. And the way we want it, in our particular look at things, 50% of our customers in the city use non-set-top box RF-based cable services. And we don't want to force every one of those customers that are enjoying that type of service without a set-top box from our competitor to have to buy a set-top box from us. So we included RF for the first 80 or so channels. So we have 2 fibers dedicated to RF video, and the other 2 fibers dedicated to IPTV, internet, and phone. So this is where the future is, but this is what we felt we needed to have. The RF video is what we need to have in order to be successful in the marketplace. You go into a substation, you have an optical line terminal, an OLT. In that optical line terminal, you have 18 cards, 4 ports per card. Bottom line is 17 ports. Just kind of hold that number in your mind for a second. And then what happens is that goes to an LCP. This business is fun with all these letters. But it's a local convergence point that in the field, it takes 9 ports to each of these LCPs, and in the end, one OLT can serve about 2,304 customers, and you just keep putting more and more of these things as necessary to serve the customers that you need. So that's the system, and again, it's a passive optical network that has electronics here, and then electronics ultimately to the home. And when we get to the home, what we do is we put we have an electric meter already on the side of the home. We put the optical network terminal next to it, and that's what converts the fiber coming into the electronic connections in your home. So it has the coaxial cable connection here for TV. For the RF video, we have 2 100 megabit per second Ethernet ports, one for internet and one for the IPTV, and then we have 4 regular POTS line type terminals for telephone. We also have a backup battery. And, you know, in Louisiana, we have these little storms that come in every now and then called hurricanes, and that knocks out people's lights. And we've thought about the fact that, you know, when one of the important things during a response to a hurricane, until you get the electricity on, is keeping people informed. A lot of folks in Louisiana have begun getting backup generators. Well, what we'll have is a capability, because of the power source for this ONT will actually be inside the house, what we call a wall wart. Just one of these little, you know, transformers that you plug into the wall, and they can actually hook that up to an electric generator outside their home in order to have their service restored. And so people have a laptop computer or have a small television, get their whole television running if they have the power, you know, electric power to be able to do that. So now, if our system can survive what I described on the reliability side, because of the head-in being electrically reliable in the substation, that they can also have that same reliability within their home. The deployment schedule, as I said, the Supreme Court decision was in February of 2007. We issued the bonds in, 5 months later. We started the project in February of 2008 and started serving our first customers a year later. And the remaining customers we expect to serve within 2 years from now. A very aggressive timeline. We've got 120,000 people, citizens in Lafayette, about 60,000 electric customers. So that's, we're looking to serve all those who initially want service by that time. Just to kind of give you an idea of some of the marketing that we're doing with this, we established something called our VIP bundles. It was not an original thought, but it was a wonderful one to borrow. Video, internet, and phone. But considering the fact that in Lafayette, our electric customers and our telecommunications customers are also our shareholders. They're one and the same, so they are by far our very most important people and patrons in the community. In our basic VIP line, we had, you'll see the prices there, $40 for 80 channels. This was our set-top box, doesn't require that. Our minimum internet service is 10 megabits per second, download and upload for $29. And phone service, $16, $84.85. We had promised our community an $85 triple play, and we delivered. On our VIP Silver, we designed these labels when the Olympic Games were going on, so the idea of having silver and gold sounded really neat. This is homegrown, partner, I'll tell you, all the way through. We have the digital service there, which has high def and 250 channels, 30 megabits per second of internet upload and download for $45, and then phone service with a lot of extra things, including the voicemails and caller IDs and so on. And then our gold package is $200, and you can see our the biggest touch there is the 50 megabits per second internet for less than $58. Again, it's about $200 product. Then we allow customers to build their own bundle, as we call it. And so we have, our basic and expanded basic television services, $17 and $40 respectively. The digital side, $51, $44, including the one set-top box for our digital basic, and $63 for our digital plus. And on the internet side, we have all these features that many companies, offer: the email accounts, the personal web space, the 70 megabytes, and this is all direct Ethernet connection. So no longer having to deal with a cable modem or a DSL modem. It goes straight to, actually run the cable all the way to some spot in your home, whether it's to your router or to your computer, free of charge with installation. And again, those are the speeds, upload and download. And these are all shared services, and we understand, and they're also oversubscribed, just like any company would do. But when you take a look at what the oversubscription ratio is, it's very, very unlikely we're ever going to deliver less than those upload and download speeds. The phone side, a lot of people getting rid of phones, but still a lot of folks have them. In fact, most of the population still has them. Now, at some point it may go away, but to be honest with you, phone was about the smallest investment we had in this. But let's look at basic line with unlimited long-distance continental USA, $31. That's pretty attractive deal. And while folks say, well, I can make those calls on using alternative sources and so on, if you're doing by cell phone at least, you are soaking up minutes. This doesn't soak up any minutes. It's unlimited period. A lot of people are taking advantage of that. On the phone service also, we have 5 cents per minute at all these places around the world. International. No special fee to have that feature available to you. Just when you make the phone call, you start getting charged 5 cents a minute. So, all these countries in Europe, North America, Australia, the South Caribbean, South America, South America, and Asia. We think, quite a valuable service to our customers. Here's some real notable features. We're community-based. I know I said that many times. And so we listen to the community. And that's what made us successful in being able to move forward with this, because the community trusted us and trusted we would continue to listen even after we had their vote. And some of the folks in our community, including John St. Julian, who's here from Lafayette, started pushing on me about this idea of a peer-to-peer capacity that was greater than our normal internet service. And we did a little digging, worked with our with Alcatel Lucent, and came up with this feature. It's included free of charge with every LUS fiber internet product with a non-static IP. If you have a static IP, there's going to be a charge for the static IP. But outside of that, it's a free of charge type service. We think it opens up doors for all our citizens and businesses to be able to transact business at a much higher rate, move larger files from one side of town to the other. So the way it works is that if I'm on the 10 megabit per second service and one of you are on the 10 megabit per second service, anytime that we go out to the external internet, that's the speed that we get, assuming that all the rest of the parts of the system connecting to the internet at 10 megabits per second, whatever server you're trying to get information from. But if we're sending a file to each other within the LUS fiber system, then all of a sudden the speed that we can convert those files, send those files to each other, is now jumps up to 100 megabits per second. We think really huge.
And Terry, real quick, what do you guys charge for static IPs? Do you have that number yet?
$5 a month. Yeah, it breaks the bank, I know. TV web portal is another issue that we were dealing with, and I heard some discussion yesterday about that, about how you deal with the people, the haves and the have-nots, digital inclusion, digital divide, whatever term you want to use. And Lafayette's no different than any other community. We have some people that, a lot of homes that have telephone and cable TV, but they don't have internet. And even though you got them internet, they don't have a computer. And so we were looking for a solution from the beginning. We actually had a task force that was formed of the community members to look at how we would deal with the digital divide and have a really good report on how we can approach that. But one of the fundamental issues is how do you get around the idea that these homes don't have a computer. And so we worked with Alcatel and came up with this approach which allows internet access without a computer through the TV. Basically, you get a Google page that you can search. Now, this does not have, you can't do YouTube, you can't do a lot of the interactive sorts of things, but you can allow a child who today is doing a book report and doesn't have access to the internet in their home to at least be able to search the internet to be able to find out information about doing a book report on Abraham Lincoln or about the Civil War or whatever the case might be. It's static information. It can't be stored. It can't be printed. But it's kind of like for those of us who live in the encyclopedia age, you know, it's a place to copy from. Not copy, but to be able to take a look at and get the information that you need. You get the idea. And that's costing, if the basic service that we use sell to a customer for that is $51.44. Our digital basic package, it uses a set-top box as the medium that connects up to this internet system. There's a USB port that you can plug in a USB keyboard to it, and that's it. And I've used it in my office. It works well. It's somewhat of a challenge because you can't get all these more involved sites. But it's probably more of picking up a site like you would on a PDA. And so we think that's going to open up some doors for our community. On the business side, the rates are as much as 100 megabits per second for $200 a month. Business customers are very excited about this opportunity. And we're going to have customized solutions for phone and video services. And what do we see for the future? We're kind of a medical hub in our part of the state, so we see the medical community being able to really take advantage of this 100 megabit per second peer-to-peer between doctors at home and their patients in a hospital. We're an oil and gas community, so large seismic data files can be moved back from one part of town to the other more seamlessly because of the peer-to-peer connection. What can you do with education? We're already connected with all those schools in our parish, providing a gigabit per second connectivity to the high schools and 100 megabit per second connectivity to all the other schools. The movie industry has found Louisiana is a very attractive place to film movies. A lot of the movies you've seen in recent times have been filmed in Louisiana because of a tax credit that's been made available there. Of course, the gaming industry, entertainment, etc. On the financial side, for those that want to look at that, we had done a customer survey at the beginning of the project. 70% of the people in Lafayette said they were interested in us providing these services, 80% of businesses. We borrowed $110 million, as I said earlier. About 60% of it is used to build the system along each street, build a head in, all the electronics, etc. The remaining funds are for individual customer services and for the early year operating costs, where we don't have enough money to pay all of our operating costs. We essentially borrow that money. The business case is based on 50% market penetration, so very conservative as compared to what our customer survey indicated, but actually we could break even with this project at 23%. So we think it's going to clearly pay for itself. The rates, as I said, are about 20% less than standard competitor rates, which gives us a really good entree into talking to the customers. And what are customers saying? I'm saving over $60 a month, getting all the channels I normally watch and receiving a much better service. I'm blown away by the super fast internet speeds, and my 9-year-old and his LUS fiber, the talk of World of Warcraft. This 9-year-old kid is beating the pants off everybody else because he has no latency. And he's got people asking, how are you doing this? You know, what do you have connected to your home? The phone quality, whether local or long distance, is clearer than anything I've ever experienced, and a lot of people are just excited to support this community project. I can't tell you how many people will tell me that this is our project, this is our initiative, and I'm talking about business people in town that will tell me this is what, to them, this is just as important as electricity and the other services they buy from us, and they know that it keeps the dollars in our community. So I don't quote the local daily paper very much. In fact, in the future, I may not be able to quote it at all. Things keep going like they're going. But this is a editorial they had about the citizens of Lafayette having put themselves on record as being in favor of progress and improved methods of dealing with business, and that they were excited. It's to call it Daily Advertiser. The Advertiser is excited about what we're doing for Lafayette, and it predicts with the advent of waterworks and electric lights that we're going to begin making history. Watch us. That was March 28, 1896, when the citizens of Lafayette decided to put in their own electric and water system. And recently they've come up with an editorial. They don't always say nice things about us, but it's nice when they do, about what LUS Fiber is going to bring to the community. More good-paying jobs, and what the future of telecommunications is. I mean, they basically kind of nailed it pretty hard as to how this can really benefit us for the future. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
All right. Any questions or no?
I think you should make your announcement.
I should make my announcement. Okay. No time for any questions, unfortunately. We had too much good content, and too much good content still to come on the show. But I want to make actually a quick comment about Lafayette and the peer-to-peer intranet, because I think that it actually has some large significance beyond simply file transfers in between the community. I've had a chance to spend quite a amount of time down in Lafayette, and it's really been quite formative for me in terms of where at least I see the future of the internet going. And it starts in a place like Lafayette, where you have this peer-to-peer intranet. Now take that unlimited bandwidth, essentially, in network, tie in some high-powered computing. They've got a place called Abacus Data Exchange, which has some very interesting computing. They've got a supercomputer at the university. They've got a supercomputer at this 3D Immersive Technology Institute. Now move as many of the internet applications as possible onto those computers. So move them into the network, which is a natural trend content delivery networks are doing anyway. That's Akamai's model. But take it to its ultimate end game, where you move all the internet into the last mile network to establish this in-network delivery model where you have infinite bandwidth, essentially. You can do quality of service, a number of other things. Establish this model in other fiber communities. Get these communities peered up with each other so they no longer have the high transport costs for bandwidth-intensive applications. And all of a sudden now you've got this playground. You've got this sandbox for developers to be able to create truly next-generation experiences in. And I really think that future is going to be starting in Lafayette, Louisiana. So I just wanted to be able to share that. But now the announcement, which I promised you guys, is the fact that I, along with a handful of others, are creating a new organization, the Rural Fiber Alliance, which we are officially announcing here for the first time in public. It's an effort to unite the voices of rural fiber deployers around three common messages. One, that all Americans deserve equal access to the best broadband. Two, the best broadband is fiber to every last building and wireless everywhere. And three, we're Americans and we can do this. It's not too expensive. It's not too hard. If we put our minds to it, we can make it happen. We are in the formative stage right now. ruralfiberalliance.weebly.com. We do have ruralfiberalliance.org. Just haven't had a chance to point it over yet. It's just an initial website. We're putting our structure in place. We're going to be inviting other rural fiber deployers in. We're also going to be looking for help from any advisors and consultants, from vendors. We really want this to be a stone soup kind of thing where everyone throws in, because we want to elevate this message in D.C. that fiber is our future if we actually can come together and make it happen. So wanted to share that announcement with all of you guys and hope that I can work with all of you moving forward to make this happen. So thank you very much for your time.
let's thank this panel. You know, I don't know about you. Should we? I do want to really hear from CRTC Commissioner Tim Denton. He left his puppet friend behind last night, and he's here all by himself with something a little bit more serious to say. Stay here for now. I mean, we're being a little bit ultra spontaneous here, but let's bring up Commissioner Denton from the Canadian. What does CRTC stand for?
Canadian Flood Control Commission.
I knew it. Let's see here. Yes, yes, we have it. And I think page up and page down gets you where you want to go.
Great.
Please welcome Commissioner Denton.
Hello, folks. You got a microphone?
Hi, I'm from government. I'm not here to help you. I just wanted to give you a very brief little taxonomy of how things work, so it'll help explain what I'm about to talk about. Because it came to me a while back, and it may be actually some little value add here. But we administer the Broadcasting Act and the Telecommunications Act. I analyze them by one deals with applications, content, and speech, and one deals with infrastructure. The Radio Communication Act, which is spectrum management, the Department of Industry handles. And you can see that basically, from my point of view, the biggest thing is that on one side, government license is required, and the other side, a government license is not required, which is all, there's no government exemption order sticker on the bottom of your computer printer saying that you've paid the $15 CRTC or Department of Industry Computers Free Speech Exemption Order. Well, I'm not kidding. So there's basically three baskets. Broadcasting Act, which is the whole panoply of Canadian content and fairly extensive and intrusive regulation. If you aren't a broadcaster, then you aren't offering a broadcasting service, then you fall into telecommunications, which is the usual no unjust discrimination, no undue preference, which is not really concerned. You don't have to have a license. And finally, if you're not telecommunications, you fall into the normal economy, which is the Competition Act, and that really means you're essentially you're not regulated. So there's the major thing that we did a while back, about 10 years back, was to say that the CRTC said 10 years back, contrary to my good advice, that the Internet, certain stuff on the Internet, full motion video on the Internet, was in fact broadcasting. But it was going to be not regulated. It was going to be exempted from regulation, which is, of course, exempted from all the licensing and Canadian content rules. And so that has recently been under review, and I'll talk about that in a minute or so. So the basic thing is essentially is that the CRTC, from another point of view, is much more deferred to by the courts and frequently the cabinet than your FCC. So there's not a continuous process of revision of what we do coming at us from the federal courts, by and large. There's no need to talk about access to infrastructure in the United States, so we'll move on to access to infrastructure in Canada. And essentially, that around about the middle of around 2005, we started going for a least access policy, something which was rather more favorable to the access of underlying facilities. And this did not please the large carriers, and that was recently contested again. And then as a result of that, in 2008, we had another hearing, and there was essentially most of those decisions on access to underlying facilities were confirmed. That result doesn't please the large carriers, and it doesn't please the people who want least access to be expanded or more readily available. So both groups are appealing that to the federal cabinet, but it's again very likely that our middle-of-the-road approach will remain. So at that point, Canadian policy is significantly, I guess, to the left of American policy, at least in regards to access of ISPs to underlying facilities. Now, the really big thing I wanted to talk to you about was a hearing that we just had called Broadcasting in New Media. And because we decided that while back that the full motion video across the internet was not to be regulated, and this issue was raised again, and obviously from the point of view of an American, you'd be quite interested in what we had to think about. So that was given the evolution and growing importance of broadcasting over the internet, were our exemption orders still the right things to do? And as I say, if you exempt something, it means you believe you have jurisdiction over it, but you're choosing not to exercise it. So we held this hearing recently, and the questions that were asked, I would say, these questions were framed before I came aboard as a commissioner. The questions were framed essentially in terms of existing broadcasting policy in Canada, which is highly nationalist, highly discriminatory towards Canadian product, and it's an aspirational statute because it seeks essentially to push water uphill, or to get Canadians to produce and watch homegrown programming, which we do, but mostly we just do what is sensible, and we take the stuff from Hollywood, we import it, and we watch it, and it pays, and that's how it works. So the questions that were asked, how are traditional broadcasters adapting to the challenges, et cetera, should basically boil down to, should we be taxing ISPs with a fund, to create a fund that would go into Canadian programming? When all was said and done and all the fancy stuff was over, people saw figures like $75, $100 million, and were presented, commissioners were presented with a long string of people from the Canadian artistic and creative community saying, yes, the internet is broadcasting. How could you ever think otherwise? Create the fund, tax the ISPs, and we will do something useful and creative with that money. Now, again, I think for Americans this would be astonishing that of about 35 groups that appeared before us, the business group said, of course, leave the things alone, you fools. And the artistic community was saying, just what I said, it's broadcasting. Give us the money. Not a single group raised the issue of free speech across the internet. Not one. And if ever there was a cultural difference between Canada and the United States, I think that would have to be, I could not imagine a comparable thing happening in the United States. You know Pat Condell, the British comic, the anti-religious comic? Hello, I'm Pat Condell. I don't respect your beliefs, and I don't care that I don't respect your beliefs, and have a good day. And he then rants against Christianity and Islam or whatever. He's in full motion video. Now, a guy like that, is he broadcasting? And if he's broadcasting, should he be balanced? Is there a fairness doctrine, et cetera, et cetera? So, freedom of speech was not discussed. And as you can see by my point, is that if you expand the Broadcasting Act, you limit the zone which is unlicensed free speech. So that is basically the issue before us. And I'm not allowed to tell you what the decision is, but I'm here, and things are going to be all right. The other thing I just want to make sure that some of you who may be interested in the net neutrality issue, 2 or 3 of you in this crowd, should maybe perhaps take a look at some of the filings and submissions on our net neutrality, our traffic management proceeding, which is coming up. So having boldly gone forth into the realm of internet licensing and free speech, we shall now tread into the technologically weary waters of net neutrality and traffic management. So stay tuned, and thank you very much for your attention.
So now we have a group participation exercise. How many want to break and meet with people versus how many people want to hang around and ask questions for another 10 minutes? Questions. Okay. Good. I'm all in favor of that. Questions.
Well, I'll go ahead and while people are getting lined up, because I know we've had a few come in on the chat. There was one question, Terry, about you guys doing a traffic shaping on your network.
What does that mean?
Well, are you guys doing anything to muck with to rate limit or to muck with traffic that's going over your network?
Is it a stupid network or not?
We're not prioritizing traffic. Everything goes through it wants to go through. The only thing that we're looking at is we're not going to allow, when we sell a customer 10 megabits per second on this system, they cannot use 10 megabits per second 30 days, a month, 24 hours a day. So there's going to be a limit. There's going to be a bit limit associated with that. But the bit limit is far above anything else that we have seen. It's in the tetra bit limit. But that, if that's what we're talking about, yes, there's going to be a limitation. Short of that, everything else is free to go. No.
The network is young. The first service was turned up how many weeks ago, days ago?
It was 7 weeks ago now.
7 weeks.
Yeah.
And how many people are actually being served right now, live?
Something less than 1 million.
Oh, it's sensitive business information. If you don't mind, Jeff, Bob Frankston has been very articulate and opinionated about many of the issues raised, and I'd like to hear what he has to say.
Okay. Actually, let me ask just a pre-question. Is this working? Okay.
Yes.
I'm just curious. This doesn't answer the real question, but does the bit limit account to peer connectivity or only connectivity outside of Lafayette?
No, it's just only the outside connectivity to the internet,
Okay,
not the peer-to-peer.
I mean, we could argue the limit, but at least it's not for the peer. The real question is the one about the economics of the model. That if you didn't have any cable or TV revenue, which is what real internet connectivity would give you, how does your financing work? And the other part of the question is, longer term, do you see getting out of the cable TV business into pure connectivity if you get the legislation changed?
No, the cable TV business is what is the most important driver to our system. That's what, I know the people who are the geeks and the people that like internet are excited with what it can bring to them. But I would bet 90% of the people that hook up to us is because of our cable TV offering, and we have to offer something that's at least comparable, if not better, than what our competitor can offer.
Okay, my concern, I understand that people want to buy better, cable and everything, but that does make you much more like a telco than being, pure connectivity, which is really where the direction of the internet is. And I've flagged that. I mean, it's a long discussion that's a concern where there's going to be a conflict, that you're in the same position as a telco in seeing the internet as a threat.
No, we don't see it that way. We don't see it as a threat. We see if people if everybody in town buys our internet, and it turns out that they can see all the video they want to through the internet, don't need cable TV. The cable TV offerings for that, and we won't offer cable TV offerings. But as I see it, for the foreseeable future, we're going to have to offer that to keep customers.
No, it's not. But I'm just talking about the payback. In other words, we get enough revenue from pure connectivity.
Yeah, it's a money thing.
I'd like to use my unfair moderator's prerogative to ask Popeye if you could please step aside and let Todd Marriott. Todd's the you can go next, Popeye, if we have time. Michael, if we have time, I appreciate your willingness to do that. Todd Marriott is the president or CEO, the current leader of the Utopia project in Utah. So I thought it was pretty important to hear from him. I'm glad you're here, Todd.
No, I appreciate it, and I appreciated Jeff has been such a crusader for this. So we want you to know from Utopia's standpoint, we support and will be a part of your effort. And I know that there's some others Dave Shaw up here is representing another effort to promote open access, and so I have so much I'd like to ask. I know, being brief on time, I'll ask Terry. I'd love to get in with James Salter, and I know this would be a fun group to argue my views on global warming. I'm all for the hoax comment, but I do believe in most of what you said and love the environment, and we could talk about why fiber and these smart grids make a difference for the environment that I love so much. But Terry, my question is for you on the LUS. In terms of your model, are you going to be open to an open access model at some point to wholesale and allow others to kind of come into that community on your network?
I have found on so many of these terms to be something that can easily be confusing. So before I answer the question, tell me what you think an open access model is.
At Utopia right now, what we are doing is when we go out to the citizens and we service over 500,000 people in 16 different cities along the Wasatch Front in Utah. So the current model that we've had to do is we go out with a third-party sales team because our legislature really binds us. You deal with the same thing. So what we do is we go out and say, Terry, here's your local network, Utopia. Here you can select from 10 service providers, over 120 different options. And it gives a real cafeteria approach to our citizens to allow them to select what and who they want to have provide them. I think a lot of what Bob was saying is, in some sense, we'd like to get down to where citizens can actually select just connectivity, and they don't have to pay for the other services. So, would you allow or be willing to peer with groups like Utopia to provide that open access model to the citizenry of the LUS?
Yeah, I guess there's always options we can consider down the road, but until we get all our bonds paid off, our business model is our business model. We're going to be the only cable TV provider. Now, if someone can buy the video services off the internet, they're free to do so. We're not going to limit them on doing that. We're going to be the only switched telephone provider on that system. If someone wants to buy it through any of the other internet-related types of services for telephone, they can do that. But we're not going to allow another cable TV provider or another switched telephone provider to be on our system.
Although, Terry, to follow up with that real quick, I'm just curious, is it fair to say that looking long-term, not committing to anything at this point, but that you would like to be able to treat your network like you do electricity, where you guys are just in the business of making the network run and selling bits and not necessarily being in services? That if you could get out of that, if that could be a workable model, you're not against that?
Not against that as long as it pays all the bills and all the commitments. And that I don't know if it can do without us taking the position we've taken on it.
Yeah, well, in fact, I know it's been said in this conference that the wholesale model simply won't work, and it is now at Utopia. It's turned around. The wholesale model will work. Open access model is more than just viable, and I would suggest to you that your ARPU and your nets, an appearing relationship would be just as good or close to it, and the intrinsic good that it would do. So maybe we should talk offline. But I would suggest that peering is important for this group to work together, because we keep working in our own parishes, we keep working in our own worlds, but we have so much to offer in a synergistic effort in terms of innovation and things that can happen, and we do need to be more united in our cause, both open access and stuff that Jeff's pushing with the fiber and the connectivity. So I think it's something that we should discuss as a group. I think Bob makes a great point in terms of connectivity and innovation where it makes sense, but especially peering, because we'll be able to get to, we're doing things with video right now that is, we believe will change the way video is done forever. And that might make a big deal. And I'm sure there's people in this room that are smarter than we are by a long shot that have things that could make a difference in terms of economics.
Yeah. If there's something we can do that benefits our business model and our community, we're willing to consider it.
Okay, there's a question from Brett Glass out there on the internet, and the question is for Terry Huval: where does Lafayette get its backbone connection, and how much are you paying per megabit per second?
We're currently getting the backbone connection we have today from AT&T and Quest, and price that we're paying is probably somewhere around 50 or 60 bucks per megabits per second, which I've been following the blog stuff too. So the math kind of shakes into how you come up with the numbers that we have, and it's an oversubscription based model. And it assumes, just like in the electric business, that you're not going to have 100% of your customers using all of your services all the time. So when you go through that math, that's how we can come back into prices that we think can pay for the service, because customers really aren't using that much internet all the time.
My question is for Mr. Salter. You mentioned that there was a problem with lack of open interoperable standards in the smart grid area. Could you describe what those are and what's being done about it?
Well, I don't really know. What the lack of standards is there's no unified software to talk to all these devices. There's no protocol standard for the communication between all these devices. That $200 thermostat and the electric meter, that sort of thing, so it's so early yet that all of the different vendors hadn't shaken out. That it's just basically.
Is there an industry standards group that's trying to develop all this stuff?
To be honest, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay, we're pretty much out of time. Terry Huval has offered, at my urging, to demonstrate a different form of fiber communication technology. Some of the fiber rubs against the other fiber, and Terry is a native. He's a native French speaker. Can you give him a boom mic, maybe, so he's playing acoustic without plugging in?
Take it right here?
Oh, you can take it right there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Terry's a genuine article Cajun who spoke French before he spoke English, from down Louisiana, and I think he's just a marvelous fiddler. But you tell for yourself.
Well, thank you very much. This is a fiber about 1800 style, and that's even in tune. All right, I'm going to do a little Cajun song, and kind of let you tap your feet a little bit if you'd like to.
Je tiendrai demain soir. William, jolie fille, c'est toi qui es mon temps. Moi, te rappelle tout l'amour que moi j'ai pour toi. That's the first time that's ever happened to me in 40 years of playing. Merci beaucoup.